They say Seattle rain is supposed to be peaceful. But that Tuesday, it felt like the sky was just as exhausted as I was. My MOM had been fighting stage 4 glioblastoma for 14 months. It wasn't a brave journey like you see in the movies. It was a brutal, ugly, soul-crushing war. I'd spent every night for 3 weeks sitting in a stiff plastic chair at Harborview Medical Center, listening to the rhythmic hum of the machines and smelling that sterile, bleached hospital air that stays in your lungs for days. Around 4 o'clock a.m., the room went quiet. The machines stopped their frantic beeping and settled into a steady, haunting drone. Mom's hand was paper-thin in mine fragile, like a dried leaf. She squeezed my fingers with the last bit of strength she had left, pulled me close, and whispered, "Tom, I'm so proud of the man you've become. Don't ever let the world change your heart." Those were her last words. In that moment, I felt like I was drifting in the middle of a dark ocean, and those words that pride was the only anchor keeping me from being swept away. I felt a weird mix of devastating grief and a newfound sense of duty. I was a man my mother was proud of. I was going to honor that. But here's the thing about anchors. They only work if the ground beneath them is solid. And as I walked out into the rain to call my wife, Sarah, I had no idea that the ground I built my entire life on, our marriage, our home, our decade-long history, was actually made of sand. I was about to find out that while I was losing my mother, I had already lost my wife. I just hadn't noticed yet. I called Sarah from the hospital parking lot. My eyes were bloodshot, my voice was cracking, and I was literally leaning against my car just to stay upright. I told her the funeral was set for Saturday morning at the chapel downtown. I expected a god. "Tom, I'm so sorry. Or I'm coming to get you. You know, the stuff a spouse says when your world just ended." Instead, there was this long, hollow pause. And then she said, "Saturday? Like, this Saturday?" "Tom, does that interfere with my 1 o'clock p.m. at the salon? You know I've had this highlight appointment booked with Andre for 3 months. It's a $400 service." I froze. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear to check if I'd dialed the wrong number. I thought maybe she was trying to deflect the pain with a bad joke. "Sarah, my MOM just died," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm talking about her funeral." "Her burial. I know, babe. And it's tragic, really," she replied, and I could hear her scrolling on her laptop in the background. "But Andre is the only one who gets my blonde right, and if I cancel now, they'll charge me a huge fee. Can we see if the service can happen on Friday instead?" She wasn't joking. She was actually weighing her hair color against my mother's final send-off. She eventually sacrificed the appointment, but the empathy ended there. For the next 3 days, while I was sitting in a dim office at the funeral home, trying to decide between mahogany or oak caskets and wondering how I was going to summarize my mother's 60 years of life into a 5-minute eulogy, Sarah was a constant background noise of resentment. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer to help with the arrangements. No. She spent 72 hours straight complaining about the $75 cancellation fee. $75. That was the price she put on my grief. I was mourning a legend. She was mourning a deposit. Saturday morning arrived, the day of the service at St. Jude's. I was standing in front of the bedroom mirror, my hands shaking so hard I could barely knot my tie. I was a wreck, emotionally drained and physically exhausted. I was bracing myself to say a final goodbye to the woman who gave me everything. And that's when Sarah dropped the bomb. She walked into the room, not in the black dress she bought, but in her Lululemon leggings and an oversized hoodie. She didn't look like someone heading to a funeral. She looked like someone heading to Target. "Tom," she said, using that high-pitched, performative voice she gets when she's about to make an excuse. "I can't go. I have to stay here. Duchess is sick." I turned around, looking for the dog. Duchess, her Frenchie, was sitting on the rug, staring at a sunspot. "What are you talking about?" "She looks fine. She's not fine," Sarah snapped. She was sluggish waking up, and she threw up once near the kitchen island. "It's a medical emergency. I can't leave my fur baby alone when she's suffering." What kind of pet parent would I be? I stared at her. I felt this heat rising up the back of my neck. "Sarah, it's a Frenchie. They throw up if they breathe too fast. They eat grass, they barf, they keep going. It's 10 in the morning. My mother's funeral starts in an hour. Are you seriously telling me a dog's upset stomach is more important than my MO?" She crossed her arms, her face hardening. "It's not just a dog, Tom. She's my child. And your complete lack of empathy, right now is exactly why I don't feel comfortable going anyway. You're being incredibly insensitive to the bond we share. Duchess needs her mama. Mama, she actually said that. I looked at her, and for a split second, I didn't recognize the woman I'd married. I realized she wasn't staying home because she was worried about the dog. She was staying home because the funeral was an inconvenience to her Saturday, and Duchess was the perfect, unassailable excuse in her twisted world of priorities. Fine, I said, my voice going dangerously quiet. Stay here with your baby. I'm going to go bury mine. I walked out the door, the sound of my own dress shoes on the hardwood echoing like a countdown. I didn't look back, but as I started the car, I saw her through the window already sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, while the critically ill dog played with a squeaky toy at her feet. Arlington Cemetery is a place of dignity. It's quiet, it's green, and it demands respect. But as I stood there by the open grave, all I felt was a burning, stinging heat of humiliation. I was the only one standing in the front row. The seat next to me, the one reserved for the person who is supposed to be my other half, was empty. Just a cold, folding metal chair staring back at me. Then came the reception. If the funeral was a test, the reception was an interrogation. Every aunt, every old neighbor, every one of my mom's co-workers from the bank came up to me with the same question. Tom, honey, where's Sarah? Is she okay? I had to say it. I had to let the words fall out of my mouth and hit the floor like lead. She's at home. The dog had an upset stomach. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw my Aunt Mary's eyebrows shoot up to her hairline. I saw my cousins trade the look, that pitying glance that says, "Oh, so that's the kind of woman he married." Every time I repeated the excuse, it felt like I was stripping away another layer of my own dignity. I wasn't just defending Sarah anymore. I was realizing how pathetic I looked for being with her. Finally, my Uncle Bill, a man who worked 30 years in the steel mills and doesn't have a filter, cornered me near the coffee urn. He didn't do the fake sympathy thing. He just leaned in, smelling like Old Spice and tobacco, and looked me dead in the eye. "Tom," he said, his voice low but gravelly, "I've been married to your Aunt Joyce for 42 years. We've been through bankruptcies, house fires, and hip replacements. You know why? Because we showed up." He gestured toward the empty space where Sarah should have been. "A woman who picks a dog's puke over your mother's grave isn't a partner's son. She's a passenger. She's just along for the ride as long as the sun is shining. But the second it rains, she's gonna let you drown alone. You need to decide how much longer you're willing to be her chauffeur." I didn't have an answer for him. I just stared at my black coffee and realized that the man my mother was proud of, he wouldn't let himself be treated like this. Uncle Bill wasn't just giving me advice. He was giving me a wake-up call, and it was loud and clear. Walking back into our house that evening felt like entering a stranger's home. The air was thick with the smell of Thai basil and ginger. Sarah was sitting on the sectional, laughing at some reality show on Netflix, with a carton of pad thai in her lap, and Duchess, the critically ill fur baby. She was doing zoomies across the hardwood floor, skidding into the furniture and barking at a squeaky toy. She looked more athletic than I'd seen her in months. No vet calls, no lethargy, just a perfectly healthy dog that had been used as a pawn to avoid a funeral. Sarah didn't even look up at first. "Oh, hey. How was it? Was it super long?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I stood there in my funeral suit, covered in the dust of the cemetery and the weight of the day, looking at her. Something inside me, some final, glowing ember of hope for our marriage, just went out. It didn't explode. It just turned to ash. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit. I just walked past her, went into our master bedroom, grabbed my favorite pillow and a heavy wool blanket, and moved into the guest room. "Tom, what are you doing?" she called out, sounding more annoyed than concerned. "Are you being dramatic because of the dog thing? I told you, she was sick earlier." I just shut the door. The click of that lock was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. For the next 3 months, I became a ghost. I was there, but I wasn't there. I made my own coffee at 5 a.m. I stayed late at the office, and I kept my mouth shut, while Sarah was out at her 2-hour-a-month pilot studio or brunching with her friends at the waterfront. I was busy. I opened a new private checking account at Chase. I redirected my direct deposits. I met with a guy named Marcus, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict personalities. We sat in a glass walled office downtown, and I laid out every bank statement, every deed, and every reason why I was done. Sarah didn't notice a thing. As long as the lawn was mowed, the bills were paid, and she had someone to fix the leaky faucet in her she shed, she was happy. She thought she'd won the funeral argument. She had no idea she'd actually lost her husband. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. About 3 months into my ghost phase, the universe handed Sarah a mirror. I was in the kitchen, prepping my lunch for the next day, when Sarah burst through the door. Her face a blotchy mess of tears and mascara. Her phone was shaking in her hand. Her dad, the only person in her family she actually treated like a human being, had suffered a major heart attack back in Chicago. He was headed into emergency bypass surgery. Tom, it's Dad, she sobbed, clutching her chest. It's bad. It's really bad. I need to book the first flight to Oahu. Please, please tell me you can come with me. I can't handle this alone. I need my husband. She looked at me with these wide, pleading eyes, expecting me to drop everything, grab my suitcase, and play the role of the supportive partner she hadn't been for me. I set down the knife I was using to cut an apple. I wiped my hands on a towel. I looked her dead in the eye, no anger, no shouting, just a cold, flat emptiness, and said, "No, I'm not going. I have things to do here." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah actually stepped back, looking like I'd physically slapped her across the face. "What?" she whispered. "Tom, this is my father. He might die. This is life or death. How can you be so cruel?" I leaned back against the counter and crossed my arms. "You're right, Sarah. It is about life and death." But I remember another life and death situation. I remember standing in our bedroom 3 months ago, begging you to come to my mother's funeral. And I remember you telling me that a dog's stomachache was a medical emergency that trumped my grief. So, since you're so worried about emergencies, you should probably stay here with Duchess. She might get sluggish again while you're gone. She started screaming then. I pitched, screeching words about how that was different, and how I was a monster for bringing up the past during a crisis. I didn't flinch. I just picked up a slice of apple, took a bite, and watched her. "It's not different, Sarah. It's exactly the same. You showed me the rules of this marriage. You showed me that we handle our tragedies alone. I'm just playing by your handbook now." She flew to Chicago by herself that night. And as the Uber pulled out of the driveway, I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. The debt was settled. Sarah was gone for 2 weeks. While she was playing the role of the devoted daughter in a Chicago ICU, I was playing the role of a man taking his life back. I didn't waste a single hour. I hired a specialized moving crew, one of those in and out teams. I told them exactly what was mine. The oak desk my MOM gave me, my books, my clothes, the leather chair Sarah always hated, and the kitchen supplies I had actually bought. It was surreal watching 10 years of a marriage get packed into cardboard boxes in under 6 hours. As the rooms emptied out, the house started to echo. It sounded hollow, which was fitting, because that's exactly what our relationship had become, just a hollow shell with no heart left inside. I'd found a studio apartment in the Belltown area, small, modern, and most importantly, mine. No dog hair, no expensive highlights bills on the counter, no resentment on the final night. The house was half empty. The shadows were long, and the silence was heavy. I walked through the rooms one last time, remembering the life I thought we were going to have. But then I remembered the loneliest pew at the cemetery, and the nostalgia vanished like smoke. I walked into the kitchen and placed a thick, white envelope exactly where she used to leave her grocery lists. Inside were the divorce papers signed, notarized, and ready to go. On top of the stack, I left a small handwritten note. It wasn't a manifesto. It wasn't an insult. It was just the autopsy report of a dead marriage. It read, "You told me I didn't understand the bond between a parent and a child. I realized you were right. I've gone to find people who do. My lawyer will be in touch." I didn't wait for her plane to land. I didn't want the drama, the fake tears, or the "I can change" speech. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and dropped my key under the mat. As I drove away toward the city lights, I looked in the rearview mirror. For the first time in a year, my chest didn't feel tight. The air felt different. I was 35 years old, and I was starting over with nothing but what fit in a moving truck, and honestly, I'd never felt richer. The peace lasted exactly until Sarah's flight touched down at CTAC. I was sitting on the floor of my new studio, eating a slice of pizza over a paper towel, when the first vibration hit. Then the second. Then a rhythmic, unrelenting buzz that sounded like a hornet trapped in a glass jar. The war zone had officially begun. In the span of 2 hours, I had 40 missed calls and over 100 texts. It was a digital landslide. First, it was the confusion. Tom, where is the TV? Then the realization. Tom, the divorce papers. And finally, the pure, unadulterated rage. But it wasn't just her. Sarah had always been a master of the narrative. Within minutes, her social circle, the tennis club mob, descended on me. I started getting texts from numbers I hadn't even saved. How could you leave her while her father is in the hospital? You're a heartless monster, Tom. I always knew you were cold. But this is a new low. Sarah is a saint for putting up with you this long. Then came the heavy hitters. Her mother left a 10-minute voicemail, 10 minutes, about the sanctity of marriage and the power of forgiveness. She talked about how everyone makes mistakes and how I was betraying my vows over a misunderstanding about a pet. I sat there, leaning against a stack of boxes, listening to the silence of my new apartment between the vibrations. It was fascinating, really. Not one of those messages mentioned my mother. Not one person asked, "Hey, did you leave because she abandoned you at a cemetery?" In their world, I was the villain, and she was the victim in the Lululemon leggings. I didn't reply to a single one. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post my side of the story on Facebook. I just looked at the screen, saw the names of people who had never truly known me, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret. For the first time in years, there in the room didn't feel heavy with her expectations or her judgment. I turned my phone face down on the floor, took a deep breath of the stale, dusty apartment air, and realized that for the first time since the Tuesday in the hospital, I could actually breathe. They could call me a monster all they wanted, but for the first time, I was a free monster. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet her. Not at the house. I was never stepping foot in that mausoleum again, but at a busy Starbucks downtown. I wanted witnesses. I wanted a neutral ground where she couldn't claim I was being aggressive just by standing still. She arrived looking perfectly disheveled, the kind of look that takes an hour to fake. She sat across from me, clutching a venti latte like it was a life preserver, and started her talk like adults routine. "Tom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice trembling with practiced precision. "I realize you were hurt about the funeral. I do. But you have to see that me leaving you when my dad was in the hospital, that was objectively different. That was a life or death crisis." I just stared at her over my black coffee. "Explain it to me, Sarah. How is it different?" She didn't even hesitate. She leaned in and said the words that officially ended any trace of affection I had left for her. "Well, because your MOM was already dead anyway, Tom. The funeral was just a ceremony. She was gone. My dad was still alive and fighting. I needed you for a living emergency. You wanted me for a dead one." I felt a coldness settle in my chest that was so absolute. It was almost peaceful. It was the clarity of a lightning strike. She sat there, looking at me as if she'd just made a brilliant, logical point. She actually believed that because my mother's heart had already stopped, my grief had no value, that my need for support was less than, because the person I loved was already in a casket. "You're right," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. "It is different. My MOM was dead. And now, so is this marriage." She started rambling, then something about communication styles, attachment theories, and how we should look into a high-end marriage counselor in Bellevue. She was talking about fixing things while I was looking at the exit. I didn't wait for her to finish her sentence. I didn't wait for the tears I knew were coming. I stood up, took a $10 bill out of my wallet, and dropped it on the table. "Keep the change," I said. "Consider it the cancellation fee for the rest of our lives." I walked out the door. I could hear her calling my name, her voice getting shrill and desperate over the sound of the milk steamer, but I didn't turn around. As the automatic door hissed shut behind me, I realized Uncle Bill was wrong about one thing. I wasn't just right to leave. I was late. I should have walked out the second she mentioned her hair highlights. But hey, better late than never. It's been 6 months since that day at Starbucks. My new place is small. It's just a 1-bedroom in a brick building with a view of the city, but every square inch of it feels like mine. I'm still unpacking, taking it slow. I don't feel the rush to fill the space anymore. Yesterday, I pulled a dusty box out of the back of the closet. Tucked between some old photo albums, I found a small tin box. Inside were my mom's old handwritten recipe cards. I picked one up. It was her legendary Sunday pot roast. The ink was a bit faded, and there was a faint grease stain in the corner from years of being on her kitchen counter. In the margins, she'd scribbled, "Tom's favorite at extra carrots." I sat there on the floor for a long time, just tracing her handwriting with my thumb, and it finally clicked. Life isn't about the $400 hair appointments, the fur baby excuses, or the curated image you project to your tennis club friends. It's not about who has the loudest argument or the best narrative. Life is about showing up. It's about being the person who stands in the rain at a funeral because someone you love is hurting. It's about putting down your own comfort to carry someone else's grief. I wasted a lot of years with a passenger who was only there for the scenic parts of the journey. I let myself believe that her selfishness was just a personality quirk I had to manage. But losing my MOM gave me the one thing Sarah never could: clarity. I'm 35 years old. I'm single. I'm starting over in a city that's expensive and loud. My family has shrunk down to a few loyal friends and an uncle who tells it like it is. But as I looked at that recipe card, I remembered her last words in that hospital room. "I'm proud of the man you've become. For the first time in a decade, I don't have to pretend to be someone else to keep the peace. I don't have to apologize for having a heart. I'm living a life built on solid ground now, not on sand. I'm the man my mother raised. I'm the man who shows up. And honestly, I think she'd be really proud of what I did with those carrots today." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments.